Well, this wood is ancient, or the ground that we're on is ancient woodland. The earliest maps I have, which are probably 200 years old, have it mainly as coppice. There are one or two bits of woodland, but not right the way across. So if you look at the bottom of it, there's mainly hazel, and there are some wild service and various other things through it. But you'll also find hawthorn and crab apples, usually on the old fence lines, the old hedge lines, which are often beside the present woodland rides, which are basically used for timber extraction lines. Most of the oak here is plantation oak and was planted in the early 1880s. So in fact there are only one or two original trees in here when you start walking through it. Most of them are all the same age, and they are about 120 odd years old, and that is what we're mainly harvesting at the moment. It's not a heavy harvest. We're taking out 2, 3, 4, 5 trees a year only over the whole wood, which is then being sawn up on site in the wood here for putting into store for maturing and ready for William to work into furniture.
And extracted by horse?
We do a lot of horse extraction at the moment. We may have to use bigger machinery when we get to some of the bigger trees, because the poor horses just end up to taking more than a couple of tons. We take most of it downhill as much as we can, use gravity, and then the mill is put up at the bottom by the exit out of the wood. So we move it as little on our own, carry as little as we can, and use as little heavy machinery in here. So yeah, that's where we've got to at the moment.
So is it mostly oak?
The big trees are mostly oak. There's probably about 5%, 12% ash. And where we've replanted, because I took a big fall out, a big patch here behind us about 25 years ago, we planted that in with alder, oak, cherry and ash. So the idea was that the oak was put into little blocks of 16s, which we would eventually thin out to leave one or two to go on as the final crop for the next big crop. Alder would come out first, followed by cherry, followed by ash in the thinning regime, and those would probably go for firewood, I think. Here, biggest problem we've got here are grey squirrels, which attack young trees, particularly just as they're getting to a reasonable size. When you think you've got them safe and about 15-20 feet high, that's when the grey squirrels decide that they don't.
Are they a bigger threat than deer?
For the oak, yes, definitely. Yeah.
What deer mean, Dina?
Deer are, again, if you look, there's very little regrowth in the bottom, natural regeneration. That's A, because we've got too much canopy, and B, the deer graze everything. So there are muntjac in here, and if we stood here quietly for another 20 minutes, we'd probably hear one at this time of year. They're everywhere, and they are not afraid. At one time, muntjac were definitely a solitary deer, and if they had any interference with humans, they disappeared. Their population in this country has now got so big that they've had to adapt their behaviour, and they live in much bigger, much higher densities. So in this wood there's probably 3 or 4, whereas 15 years ago, 20 years ago there would only be 1.